Welcome back to the Mountain Morning Show. I have Matt and Reed Carlson here in studio. Not only are they brothers, they are both high school volleyball coaches, and they also run a business called Utah Athletic Center, and we are happy to have them here to not actually talk about any of that. Well, we will actually mention it, but more importantly, to focus on mindfulness training in athletes. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So I've heard that you guys have really employed a mindfulness technique when dealing with athletes. You're both volleyball coaches, so the mind is really, really important to be able to have the right frame of mind, the right headspace, not let mistakes affect the entire game. I mean, mindfulness is important in all areas of life, but I think especially athletics. So tell me about how you do it, why you do it, benefits you've seen from it.
I think one of the hardest things for an athlete is they bring their personality into it, and we say that where your attention goes, your energy flows. And so it's really hard to be able to split your focus on worrying about myself and how I feel and to do the job required to be good at a sport. I mean, the sport is just a game. And so if we focus on the game, it's a lot easier to be good at the game. And so what we found is the athletes, when they can take themselves out of the equation and focus on the actual game components. In volleyball, for example, it's just the angles and the force in volleyball, that's all that matters. So when we can get their brains just only on creating good angles and applying the right amount of force and stopping the angles and the force from our competition, it's a lot easier for these athletes to become really great, because what you think about is what you become great at, right? And so the more that they're worried about themselves and making mistakes and doing all those things and not worrying about what actually controls the game, it can downward spiral, as we were talking a little bit earlier. And so it makes it really hard for them. So I think for us, it's helping them understand what is required to be good at the game and to put all of your energy and focus there. And then when you get away from the game component, when you're training, when you're doing those things, taking on the attributes that you want to develop. You know, for example, if you want to be disciplined, then you have to be disciplined. You have to think like discipline, make discipline a person. And then as you take on those attributes of discipline, you can change, because you will always remain the same if you always think the same way you've always thought. So it's trying to help them kind of get outside themselves and realize that what they think about is really how they feel and then who they become. And so if they want to change, we have to think differently. We have to feel differently. And so that's a lot of what we spend our time on, is helping them understand where to put their focus, where to put their attention.
So how do you do that? How do you train an athlete to be able to just focus on what matters? Because there's so much going on, and especially when you're young, it's really sometimes hard to have that discipline in your mind, really, to be successful.
Yeah, when we look at the game of volleyball, it's a game of mistakes, for example. You know, every time you mess up, you cost your team a point, and it's really hard for a young kid or athlete, boy or girl, who, when they're 10, 11 years old, you miss a serve, and everyone's looking at you, and you cost your team a point, and it's tough. And so what we do is we teach these kids how to be in the present moment. If you're always thinking about the past, you know, if you make a mistake and keep reflecting on that mistake, then you're kind of doomed to repeat that past in the present moment. So your future becomes essentially a repeat of the past. And so really we keep them to be very mindful and be present in that very moment to make sure that they start creating a better future for themselves. So
fascinating. So what techniques do you use as you train these girls? Obviously you're going through, you know, you're helping them train to be conditioned and you know, to be strong and all the things that they need to be successful volleyball players. How do you train the mind, though?
I think number one is teaching them awareness, and because they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what they're missing. And so in the moment, what we're doing is we ask a lot of questions. So if we ask the right question, it gets their brain going and towards the right outcome. You know, and it's all about the questions. Because if I ask the wrong question, for example, why did you make that mistake? What they're going to think about are all the things that contributed to the mistake, and so they're going to be stuck in this mistake loop, and so they can't get better because it's not a solution. What do we want them to do? What do we want them to think about? Those are the questions we start asking. And so as we give them the opportunity to become aware through questions, their brain is working and creating new neural patterns. And so what happens when they have these new neural patterns, they recognize it the next time a little bit easier. And then the more they think about it, the more they're thinking about what they're going to do, what they should be looking at, then it becomes trained. But like anything else, the discomfort of it at first is unbelievable, because what you're not used to is incredibly hard, and it's very uncomfortable, and that's the problem, is we don't want to be uncomfortable in those training. But that's the only way to grow, that's the only way to expand their abilities. So awareness training is one of those things, is helping them to just understand what they're supposed to be thinking about in that moment, what they are actually thinking about. So just, again, asking a ton of questions. Matt does a great job at leading them through helping them understand personal meditation, and I'll let him talk about that.
So one thing we do say is you don't know what you don't know, right? And so, applying the awareness and just helping them to give them knowledge to understand what they're feeling on the inside and what their thoughts are doing is tough. And so especially for a high school girl who has a billion things focusing on all the stresses of life. And so what we try to do is we try to teach them to, hey, number one, let's teach you how to remove stress. Because if you're operating in a high stress function, you're activating this fight or flight, right? And so when you're stressed, you're going to be either running away from the problem or ready to fight the problem. And then you can't really function in the moment because you're thinking about the future anxiety or the past problems you had. And so we just teach them how to be in the moment by going through these kind of guided meditations where we usually typically take our athletes and say, hey, what are things you're grateful for? When you're in a stressful state, you look at these brain scans they do, and people have what's called high beta. They put the EEG machines on their brains, and in high beta, that stress, you can't function. Again, it's fight or flight, and so we get these kids to be in a state with alpha, right, where you just kind of are low beta, where your brain waves are just calm and they can actually be in the moment. And then from there, you can create your life. And so we teach them, like, what do you want to become? Reed mentioned earlier, you have to be the attribute. If you want to be confident or feel confident, you need to teach your body what it feels like to be confident and be in that present moment that way. And so we teach them a lot of things, like in the moment, hey, take a step back, get yourself to be calm, think through it, and then kind of be creative of your life, even on the court. We're doing it.
To hear you too talk about it, it makes so much sense to incorporate mindfulness into a team setting, although I feel like this is kind of a new thing that people are thinking about. How has it changed? You've both been coaching high school for quite a while, very successful, by the way. Good job, congratulations.
Thank you.
But how has it changed over from when you started your career to where you are now?
We laugh at ourselves when we think about how we started and how absolutely unaware we were as coaches. The things that we did early on, we look at now and we just think, man, we knew nothing. And so what we've seen just from the group of athletes that we work with on a high school level and then in a club level, we run a club volleyball program as well, is all of a sudden now by incorporating these things, our teams are becoming nationally recognized. They're in the top 20 in the entire country. And the only thing that's really changing is the way that they are thinking, how they are approaching things. And all of a sudden, because they're becoming more aware of what's going on around them, when we go to these tournaments, we just came back from a really big tournament in Kansas City, and our teams had these incredible finishes, higher than we've ever had. And I look at that and I think not much of the volleyball X's and O's have changed. Really what's changed is our emphasis on how they think and how they're approaching practice. And so now when they're practicing, like we said, what you think about is what you become an expert at. So now because they're in practices focusing on what really matters, focusing on the angles and force of volleyball, for example, now they're so much better. So when they get to these tournaments, they're not rattled. They're not worrying about themselves. They don't walk off the court with a lot of emotional responses. They're not on the court having emotional responses. I remember early on, we would see girls during the middle of matches start crying, and we just couldn't understand, like, why in the world are you crying? And now as we've gotten to understand the process, it's really easy to understand how people can get caught up in the moment and let the emotions drive them because they attach themselves to what they're doing, and they have to let that go. They have to let that go.
Yeah, even looking back and seeing how we used to coach, and it was kind of using force to change force, right? And so kids weren't performing well, so hey, you're on the line, you're running, and you keep making them run until they hopefully change. And now it's more just saying, hey, let's be in this with you. Why are you making the decisions you're making? And then it's going more on a really inner level. We talk a lot about their inner world has to be greater than their outer world. And so we spend a lot of time focusing on helping them develop as character-based athletes and help them be kind of warriors on the inside, where nothing on the outside affects how they're feeling on the inside. And we've seen huge success. Now kids are more motivated, kids are more confident, kids are more just driven to make the right decisions. Big stresses of life has become less and less emotional with them. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Learning that at such a young age will just translate to more success throughout life, and they'll see how those lessons they're learning in mindfulness and on the court will help them, survive other stresses and other things that are happening. I could talk about this all day. I think mindfulness is very fascinating, and I'm so impressed that you are both incorporating it into your programs. But before I let you go, you're both brothers. You played for the U volleyball. You both decided to go into coaching, and you also own Utah Athletic Center. Tell me a little bit about your relationship, how you work together, you kind of parallel each other in your career path, and about Utah Athletic Center.
Yeah.
You know, what's interesting is growing up, I'm 6 years older. I know I don't look it, but I'm just kidding. But you know, Matt was always included in everything my friends and I would be doing. And so we've always just thought that we would do something together. We used to run a fitness business, and then we started a volleyball business. Kind of, it just happened. We never thought we'd be coaching girls volleyball or doing anything like that. And so we enjoyed the coaching so much, we decided to let go of the fitness business, and we just 100% focused on coaching volleyball. And so it's just evolved, you know, just the teams, more kids have come to the program, and so we needed a place where we could house all these girls. And so we decided to start the project of the Utah Athletic Center, which is a 65,000 square foot facility that has 12 full volleyball courts, and it has some basketball courts in there. And so, yeah, and so we just started that, and we wanted it to become kind of the place where athletes could come and be a second home for them, and a place where we could actually run tournaments in Utah. And it's been really fun. We've really enjoyed the process of doing that. And sort of for Matt and I, we get to go to work together every day and hang out. And you know, some days are fun and some days are stressful, but we at least, you know, we've always been so close that we couldn't imagine, I think, doing business without each other.
Yeah, sure.
Well, it's good that you get along.
Yeah, yes.
My son has played at Utah Athletic Center quite a few games, basketball games, and it's very impressive despite how much is going on with all of the different courts that you have in that warehouse. You're really able to just focus on your team and what's happening right where you are. And then when you're done, you're like, wow, there's so much else going on here. So it's really impressive. Where can people get more information about, you know, your volleyball teams, mindfulness, as well as Utah Athletic Center?
Yeah, if you go to utahathleticcenter.com, you can find a lot of information there, as well as on social media. You also can go to what's called Personal Innovative Industries, or PI. You can look on social media for that, as well as Club V Volleyball. You can find information. So we have lots of different clubs and different companies that operate out of the UAC, or Utah Athletic Center. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for being here. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I wish you all the luck in the future with your teams and everything you have going on.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, mindfulness in sports is essential, but also in life. Focus on the present. You are great with what you think about. I think that's kind of the theme. That translates to all areas of life. But again, I want to thank Matt and Reed Carlson for being here, for a great job coaching, bringing mindfulness to their girls, as well as developing a great business, Utah Athletic Center. All right, we have much more coming up right after this quick break.